the waiting room just yet.
For some reason, it's not letting me.
Okay, that's okay. I'll just hang out if you need me for anything. Somebody else will have to let people in.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
I could help with that. For some reason, I seem to have some sort of control.
Okay.
Oh,
I
you know
seem
what?
to
I
as
think I
well.
accidentally made you the host, Cecilia. That's what's happening.
Oh, well, I hit the record button to the cloud. I don't know which cloud it's in, but I did that too.
So it will come back to you in an email this afternoon from Zoom.
Okay.
We don't care what cloud it's in, just as long as we get the recording.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
can admit people.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Please put your name and position in the chat room so we can all see who we have with us today. All right. Some friendly and familiar faces. Thanks for coming.
Lisa, so nice to see you again. I'm looking forward to hearing Thermalito's story again.
At least I've been inviting her to everything lately, and she's graciously agreed to every invitation.
That's okay. Sherry's gonna get a bill.
Didn't you hear she's buying you lunch at the Lunchless Lunch and Learn?
Yes.
I think that's really reasonable. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're just going to wait a little bit longer for some other folks to join us. Please put your name and your position in the chat room, and we'll get started soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, and I reshare the host button with you. Yes.
Thank you. All right, let's get started, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us. I think more people will trickle in as the hour goes on, but thank you all for being punctual. My name is Amir Alavi, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Chronic Absenteeism Reduction here at Riverside County Office of Education. And last year, we started a tradition with some of our other partners and colleagues of our Lunch and Learn, which is going to be a monthly virtual hour-long workshop or presentation where we'll come together and feature different districts from around the state and sometimes school sites or maybe speakers, but hopefully topics that'll be of interest to you. And we're very, very grateful to partner this year with our friends from Attendance Works. And we have Cecilia Leong, who is one of the founders. Needs no introduction in the work of attendance. Thank you so much, Cecilia and Attendance Works, for partnering with us again this year. And I also want to introduce a couple of other special guests who are partnering with us moving forward. My dear friend, Sherry Haney from the Butte County Office of Education. She is the coordinator of student attendance and engagement, and Butte County Office of Education will be joining us in this collaboration. We also have Wendy Hall, another friend of the community and of ours, who is with the Shasta County Office of Education. Shasta County Office will also be joining us, and we hope to just expand this collaborative, and it'll be a statewide event. And when you get the links, please feel free to distribute them to whoever you'd like. And with no further ado, I would like to turn it over to Cecilia.
Thank you, Amir, and it's so good to see everyone again for another year together. This has become one of my favorite monthly events where I get to hear so much of what you all are doing in innovating and doing good work in student attendance. So Amir asked me to say a few words today about some of the new resources we have from Attendance Works. And I do want to acknowledge how tricky it is right now to talk about attendance in the midst of a pandemic. So when we're reaching out and speaking with families, with students, it's so important that we are multidimensional in what we say. When we only talk about attendance, it sounds tone deaf, like, aren't you paying attention? People are getting sick out there, right? So we really need to be communicating about a bunch of different things. We have to talk about health and safety, but we also want to extend a warm, contactless welcome back to our students and families. And we want to talk about attendance engagement and different learning options, as we sometimes have families bouncing back and forth because of quarantine or exposure to COVID or different things going on. So I just want to acknowledge that what you're doing this year is probably a level harder than you've ever done before. And one of the things we've tried to do at Attendance Works is adapt the materials we have, knowing that you're going to have to tailor for your particular context. So we've put out back to school letters, just like we do every year. But this year, the messaging on our principal's letter, for example, really stresses keeping safe, keeping healthy, and if you're out of school, keeping connected. We really learned during the pandemic that students and families can feel so isolated when they are not in person. And so keeping connected, and whatever mode of learning you're in, to keep learning, right? Even if you're in quarantine, you may not be, feeling badly enough that you can't participate and should participate. And I know many of you are working hard on those short-term independent study options to keep our students learning. So this is the messaging that's so critical to put together. I just wanted to share an example from out of state. I really liked this video that the Cleveland School District put out in advance of school opening to assure their families about the what steps they're taking to prevent the spread of coronavirus for in-person learning. And you may already have done videos like this, and if you have, it would be so wonderful if you would share in the chat or follow up afterwards with Amir, because while I admire Cleveland, I always like to hold up California examples. So for our national campaign, we really are focused on rebounding with attendance. And as always, we've prepared badges for you. I've been talking about this for months, and finally I get to tell you, yes, they're here. We have our translated materials for you. So even if you can't speak these languages, you can use the badges in Chinese, in Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese. So whatever, you can put more than one badge on if you want, or just one per week, day of the week, just for the fun of it. Hetty Chang, our executive director, has done a short video that if you want, you can use the YouTube link there and send it out or embed it somewhere, where she talks about the attendance awareness campaign and our resources. We've had amazing districts and schools in our webinars this year, and we have one more coming on September 29th. And I invite you to join us. There's plenty of room in the webinar room. And if you missed one, just know that the recordings are on the Attendance Works website, and each session has a guide if you want to discuss afterwards with your colleagues what you watched. Truly inspirational folks on these webinars. So also we have put out the last piece of our Pathways to Engagement toolkit on crafting engagement strategies during the fall. So I encourage you to take a look at this toolkit. It's like a TARDIS, bigger on the inside than the outside. Bigger inside than outside. So there are a lot of hyperlinks with tools for school teams, district teams, how to come up with your tiered strategies, and links to lots of different resources that we've reviewed and curated for you. So take a look at each piece of the Pathways to Engagement toolkit, particularly the fall section, which we just put out on creating community at school. So I'm going to hurry along because I really want to hear from our guest speaker today. So we also have taken our traditional handouts for families, which we've always had for preschool, elementary, and secondary. We've adapted them for COVID, and they are now available in multiple languages. So take a look at the website and, please don't reinvent the wheel. You can put your own logo on it and use the same materials. And similarly, I think we're already at that stage in the school year where we want to be talking with families in a positive and proactive way. And we've updated our student attendance success plans so that you can use them in discussing ways to help families make up backup plans on getting their kids to school, keeping track of absences, and also how to keep them learning while they are out. So as always, it's a flurry of activity this month. So continue checking back on the attendance awareness website for new materials, sample proclamations, all sorts of things are coming out regularly. So make sure you sign up for those updates. And if you are a social media person, follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And certainly we'd love to see what you have in the works. This has been a period where people have been innovating incredibly. So thank you for your attention. And I encourage you to make use of all the free resources we have. Okay, so that's it from me. Amir, back to you. And if you all have questions, you can pop them in the chat.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Always great to see the resources that you all have. And you're always evolving and changing and growing. And so thank you for sharing that. And we always encourage our districts to utilize those resources. It's rare to be able to find incredibly high quality resources like the handouts for the families that we can just borrow with permission and put our own logos on. And so I hope you'll all take a look at that. Next, I wanted to hand it over to our friend Sherry Hani. And Sherry, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, anything you'd like to share, and our upcoming presenters. I can't wait to hear them.
Thank you, Amir, and thank you so much, Cecilia. I always appreciate the work that you put in to keep your documents relevant to the times, especially this last year and a half. It's been such a fantastic resource. So I'm hoping everyone's participating in Attendance Awareness Month and just looking at year-long campaigns. So thank you for that. As Amir said, I am the coordinator for student attendance and engagement at Butte County Office of Education. So I have worn the attendance hat, so to speak, for many, many years. And the other big role I take care is supporting around mental health, which we all know is so very tied to the attendance of our students. So very happy to be doing that work. Probably some of the best days are like we had on Monday, where I actually got to go out to a school site and talk to students live and in person. Although it was about mental health and suicide prevention, which is a heavy topic, it's fantastic to be around students in that way again. So, and speaking of supporting our students today, I'm so happy we have Lisa Cruikshank with us, who is a director from the Thermolito Union Elementary School District, and she oversees their student advocate program. So I've had the pleasure of working with Lisa. Well, we've worked together for many years, back when I was a school counselor and she was a teacher at one of our middle schools.
Yeah.
and had the pleasure of working with her from the beginning of the student advocate program. So she's here to share with us what that looks like and the success we've had. So I am going to be somewhat moderating that and sharing my screen, and I just appreciate everyone's grace as I jump back and forth here and doing that, because we do have a short video that we want to share as well. So Lisa, with that, if you want to take a minute and tell us kind of your role within the district, and then if you want to tell us a little bit about what your district looks like.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me today. Sherry, I've enjoyed working with you. Lisa Cruikshank, I am Director of Special Projects here in Thermolito. So it's pretty much state and federal accountability, assessments, intervention, all other duties is assigned. It's been very, very busy through this pandemic. And part of that, I'll share about our district, which you can see in the slide that you see here. Thermolito is located in Oroville in Northern California, about an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half north of Sacramento. And our population, we have a fairly diverse population for a rural area. As you can see at the first point in the slide. We do have a fairly high population of students with disabilities or students with exceptional needs. We have almost 1%, or I'm sorry, 10% of our students have individualized education plans. We have a very high population of low income. We have a significant amount of homeless and foster care students as well. About 16% of our population are English learners. A majority of that is Hmong speaking families. We do have some Hispanic as well.
Great, thank you, Lisa. I'm gonna jump over to, back in June, Hetty Chang from Attendance Works did an interview with Lisa sharing about their student advocate program. So I want to share that video with you that I had up. Sorry, give me 1 second here.
Yes, I did not know how this video was going to be publicized. Oh my gosh.
Okay, here we go.
Amateur for sure.
Let me make sure I have audio going here. All right, so we're going to just share with you about 7 or 8 minutes of the video that'll give you the foundation of the program, and then Lisa will share with us some more.
What we've been hearing about, and Sherry has been bragging about Thermolito for quite a while now, is that you've really been able to make significant improvements in both chronic absence and in suspension over the last few years. So Lisa, Sherry has been talking so proudly of the kinds of improvements that you've been able to make in chronic absence and reducing suspension rates at Thermolito. Could you tell us a little bit more about your data?
Yeah, when we noticed that our chronic absenteeism was at 15%, that we needed to make some changes. And they were connected with suspension. So with chronic absenteeism, we were able to get down below from 15% to below 9%, and which helped cut our suspension rates nearly in half.
Absolutely, those two things can be very connected. Let's stop sharing slides for a moment, and I want to hear more about the strategies you have in place. So Lisa, what did you do? How did you get those impressive gains?
You know, when we saw the data, we knew we needed to make a significant change. So what we did was we hired student advocates for every site. These advocates are classified personnel or paraprofessionals. They work half-time every day, about 4 hours every day at each site. And the whole idea was to build positive relationships with students and families, with all the students and families. And it morphed very quickly into student advocate teams where they started meeting weekly to to really focus on students who were not making it to school. It was the school principal, counselor, the advocate, administrative secretary, sometimes the school nurse, and the school resource officer would join the teams. And we would meet weekly to look at data and troubleshoot what can we do to help get these students to school. And it almost became a competition between the sites and who could improve their chronic absenteeism weekly.
Lisa, as they did that work with individual students, did they ever identify larger groups of students who had particular challenges, and then as a result of that, learn that they maybe had to engage in some kind of more programmatic intervention?
There were some student groups that stuck out. And what was really nice is we had, within the student advocates, they were rooted in the community. They lived in the community. We also had a Hmong student advocate who could really connect with the Hmong population. We also have interpreters for both Spanish and Hmong speaking families. So we're able to really connect with them. And when we discovered student groups that were,
it could even be kids who live in a particular housing project, part of the neighborhood. There are different ways to think about groups of students.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And, we did find some student groups we had to really focus on. We discovered that we had a housing complex that had a high chronic absenteeism. So the principal started a walking school bus, and she would walk to the complex and take the student advocate and the secretary and whatever teachers were available, gather up the students and walk them to school. And it became fun. It got to where the kids wanted to come to school because they wanted to join the walking school bus, and they were encouraging each other to get out there and join. And parents were coming out with cups of coffee to chat with the principal right there in the housing complex. It was pretty amazing.
Wow. Were student advocates able to play a role in sort of creating that warm, welcoming environment at the school site itself and helping kids feel that sense of connection?
Absolutely. They were the key to making the connections. For one thing, they were from the community, so they already knew families. They worked in the mornings and greeted families as they arrived at school. Advocates were out on the playground during recess. They were out with the kids during lunch. They would sit and have lunch with the students and make connections with them outside of the classroom.
That's fabulous. And so when the pandemic hit, how did you have to pivot?
That was a challenge for everybody. And that's where our interpreters, our Hmong and Spanish interpreters, really were able to help families who all of a sudden had a transition to distance learning. We made more phone calls home, made more home visits with families, had to really focus on, helping families with technology and engaging. It was really difficult to engage the kids. So those phone calls, and the advocates started Zooming with these students. The advocate and the counselor buddied together and started doing social emotional learning videos and engagement videos for groups of kids and grade levels of kids, which help kids keep kids engaged and logging into Zoom and doing the best they could with their work for school. So advocates were key there.
What happened with teachers during this time?
Teachers were amazing. I know it was really stressful for all of us, but they stepped up and they started making personal phone calls home to students. They would especially for students who were struggling, and then they started to improve. Those phone calls home just really motivated the kids to continue to improve. So focusing first on the struggling kids, but also making sure that they were acknowledging the kids who were working hard and and logging in every day.
We definitely saw in places across the country that when teachers knew they had the support of an advocate, it almost made it easier because they know that they could both reach out, but they know that they could find support if they identified and detected challenges that they might felt were beyond their own capacity to address. So I could imagine that the student advocates actually helped with that. So as you think about next fall, what are some of your plans given the insights you've gained this year?
Well, we are planning on being full in person next fall. And something the advocate teams are working together stronger than ever. And then we have pulled even other staff and personnel together to help focus on kids, custodial, cafeteria, and also our classroom para educators, connecting with those kids. And we have some strong students out there that we want to connect with struggling students. So the students who are doing well, having them, not only having adult staff encouraging our struggling students, but having peers encouraging them and supporting them as well.
That's fabulous, that peer connection.
So I'm going to stop the video sharing there and go back to our PowerPoint and let Lisa just talk a little bit more about the program. So let me pull that back up. So Lisa, of course, one of the questions whenever we do a program like this is how you funded that. So do you want to talk a little bit about how this all started?
Sure. The state provided a grant opportunity, Learning Communities for School Success program. It's a competitive grant that we applied for, which we were awarded for 3 years. And that got the ball rolling with the idea of starting our student advocates and creating those personalized, positive relationships with not only students, but with parents and the entire family.
And then one of the things you had talked about this evolving to is really these weekly meetings. And so can you talk a little bit more about how that's become such an integral part of your site attendance efforts?
Yes, this was actually key to the success of the program. It just morphed. It's not something we planned, it just happened, which was absolutely wonderful. And what it did was, the student advocates and I met weekly, and we realized it needed to be a stronger focus at each school site. So we encouraged principals, secretaries, counselors, school nurse, sometimes a school resource officer, to come together once a week to really hone in on data and look at the students who were chronically absent. And that quickly became a weekly meeting for them, and they would be case managers for groups of students to check in with them every day and make those phone calls, home visits for the principal, and quickly became something important that happened every week to keep focused on the students who are not only struggling with attendance, but those students who are improving and making it to school.
Great, thank you. And one of the key pieces you had pointed out in the video was that connection with parents as well. So how are those advocates really making those connections with parents and guardians?
We have a lot of success stories in that. And part of it is the advocates are there to greet parents as they drop the children off in the morning for school. They're greeting they're saying goodbye to students as students leave school. Advocates are often part of a home visit, but they're the positive support in the home visit. They're not a punitive or you're in trouble for your student not coming to school. They were always a positive aspect of the team, which helped build a relationship with the parent. Just one example is a family was really struggling because they were struggling financially, and because mom couldn't find a job, and one of our advocates really encouraged her and helped her find a job, and she came back to the school site a few months later all excited because she'd actually found it or was hired for a job, and thanked our student advocate personally for the encouragement to help her do that.
That's fantastic. Love hearing those stories.
We also had all kinds of parades. We had parades where we went through the community, where all the teachers got together in their cars and paraded through the community during COVID, which I think really promoted some family atmosphere for the schools. We purchased signs that are yard signs that we personally went around and put in students' families' yards. You know, a student from Plumas Avenue School or a student at Poplar Avenue School. There was a lot of pride taken in that as well. And then the parents turned around and surprised everybody with a reverse parade where the parents paraded around back through the school through cars. It was pretty heartwarming to see all of that happening during the COVID pandemic.
That's fantastic. Really shows the value that the parents found in those connections that were made.
Yeah.
So yeah, fantastic. And what about the connection with community resources? How are the advocates helping families when there's those higher level needs identified?
So we are fortunate that we have school counselors at all of our sites. And oftentimes it's our school counselor that helps connect families out with resources in the community. We also have a school resource officer who can connect families with resources in the community as well. And we offer lots of fun, engaging parent nights, like we had paint nights, technology nights. We invited parents in for technology. We brought them in. We have a kiln at one of the schools. We brought them in to do clay projects and fire the kiln projects with their students. Gosh, there's so many. It's some I can't remember them all. We have many morning activities where we have pastries with parents, donuts with dads, muffins with mom, with huge turnout. And we always give away books to students who bring parents in for those activities. Also, as you know, coffee with the principal. We have still school sites that do that as well.
That's great. Thank you. You know, one of the things I wanted to be sure and share when we talk about this parent connection is what one of your principals said about advocates reaching out and inviting the parents in rather than waiting for families to take that initiative. And I found that so powerful because in a lot of the work we're doing where the struggle for some of our schools is really the fact that they open their doors to parents, but parents don't show up, is these advocates really sort of going out and bringing parents in and making them feel welcome. So I really find that to be a key piece of that connection that your advocates have created with parents.
It is very much so.
Any final pieces you would share before we go to some question and answer time?
We've shared a lot. I can't think of anything at the moment. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we're happy to take questions. I will share that because of the success of Thermolito with this program, our own BCOE schools applied for that Learning Community Schools grant. And we just did the first training for the student advocates for our own BCOE programs, relying very much on Lisa and her advocates to help us sort of walk that initial entry into this project. So
congratulations.
Thank you. With that, any questions that anyone has?
Sherry, my friend, I think we have a question in the chat from Cecilia wanting to know about the job description of I believe, student advocates. And I know that you mentioned some of that already, but I would love to know a little bit more. That sounds like a key position. And then also, how many do you have in your district?
So to simplify the job description, it is a classified job description, and it is only part-time, almost 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And we have one student advocate per school site. So we have 3 elementaries and a middle school. And these student advocates often have another job at the school site, like a classroom paraeducator or a campus supervisor. And so they're at school almost all day. So they're student advocate position fits nicely with their position that they already have at the district, and they have them, so they're there at the beginning of the school day, they're there during lunch, and they're at the end of the day. Would we expand this to a full-time position? Seriously considering that. It's working really well with us that they have two positions where they do two different roles in the school site. So we haven't had to really focus on a full-time position, but it would definitely be something we would consider. Did that help? Did that answer your question, Cecilia?
Yeah, that partly answers my question. I was curious about, finding the right kind of person.
Oh,
They're the face of your school, right?
We had to really recruit. I had it in mind. I tried to recruit from within the school site to begin with, because I knew they already had connections with families at the schools. So that really helped make the program successful to begin with. I will be honest, it's been more difficult at the middle school because the advocate we had there was amazing, and then he ended up getting a full-time tech job at another district. So it was really hard to find someone to fill those shoes. We had new people coming in who didn't know the students, had to rebuild those relationships. So, oh my gosh, the relationship with the students is huge, absolutely huge. And middle school students I was a middle school teacher for years, so they're from a different planet. But connections and getting someone who lives in the community, who knows families in the community already, has been a huge plus for us.
Yeah, I think because initially these were people who were already working at the schools, and many of them lived in those communities. There
I think that was
trust there.
I would agree with that. It was key.
It's definitely been a challenge when that position has had to change, or with our own schools starting this program. It's often been the person who's identified to take on this role, and they may or may not live in the community, because for our programs, kids are coming from so many different parts of the county. So it will be interesting.
It sounds like, Lisa, you were also, right now, everyone's struggling to find staff. And it sounds like you were trying to piece together something that added up to pretty good job with lots of hours. And I'd be curious what other people are doing too.
Yeah, it does help. People are looking for full-time positions. So it did help to couple it with another position. And that just happened organically. That wasn't, we don't fly a position that it's a classroom para educator and a student advocate. They're all flown separately, and oftentimes we're able to interview and make that happen. We just recently have a new person at the middle school this year, and that's what we were able to do.
Other questions for Lisa while we have her here? She's going to start saying no to me at some point.
No, not to you,
I
Sherry.
have a question. Lisa, speaking about organically, it seems like these teams came together organically, that maybe that wasn't the original intent, but now all of a sudden at your sites, you had multidisciplinary teams that were having weekly meetings to address, relevant topics. Is that something, first of all, that is fantastic. I know our friends at Attendance Works are really promoting that kind of approach, team building. At our COE, we're very much promoting that at every level. All hands on deck is our mantra for that. But it's just amazing that organically your teams came together like that. Is that something that you want to try to continue in the years to come, or maybe formalize it? Or now that this wonderful work is happening, how are you going to handle teams moving forward?
I oversee the program, so I'm the glue that's trying to keep it all together. We have some amazing principals who have found it to be very important. And we also did some incentivizing with some competition, some friendly competition, I got a 3-foot trophy that we were giving to schools that had the best, most improvement in chronic absenteeism. The principals got really bought in because they're all very competitive, and which school would get the most, would have the most improvement. We also have school classroom competitions and grade level competitions in the school, and the school sites found that helped with the motivation and the enthusiasm and the engagement of everybody bonding together. Was just a little bit of friendly competition. So the teams, what has happened, the data sold it. We saw the improvement with the data, which is keeping the motivation to keep the ball rolling with the teams.
I think that's something, Lisa, that I really honed in on when you were talking, is that for one, like Amir said, it sounds like it was that, you had that organic grouping of the teams coming together around various topics. And then because they were able to look at data and have those real conversations and act upon it, and then go back to the data and then see the relationships building, that it just naturally becomes part of their system. And I think that's the part that sounds really exciting to me, is that you have the makeup of your teams really lends itself to a diverse perspective coming into these meetings from various parts of your system, even the community, and then having those routined meetings together. I'm curious about when they meet weekly, since there's 4 of them and they're 4 different sites, have you noticed, is their agenda similar? Are they loose agendas, or about how long do they meet each week? And are they cross talking about data?
So the meetings last, we try to keep them brief, from a half hour to 45 minutes. The data we look at is through our student information system, which happens to be ARIES. So we have a chronic absenteeism built into ARIES analytics, where we can easily see students we can even see them by student group in ARIES. So that's the main focus. All sites, that's what they use to focus on. So they do have an agenda, and usually the principal is facilitating the meeting. Sometimes the counselor will facilitate, and it's set as a meeting maker in everyone's calendar, which is important. Everyone figures out a time that works for them. So it's important enough that they have it in their calendar. We have a facilitator, we have an agenda, and it's fairly similar across campuses. Our middle school did something a little different in that the kids that were really struggling, they decided to start bringing the parents in to personalize meetings, to brainstorm, to have a positive meeting, to help brainstorm ways to help get the student to school. The elementary sites have not brought parents into a meeting. They do go out and do home visits, but they haven't brought invited the parents into the school. Did that answer your question?
It did. Yes. Thank you. It just sounds like the way you've created this, or the way they've come together, that it doesn't sound like it's one more thing that they're doing. It sounds like it's embedded into what they're already doing and relevant to what they need. So thank you. Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I should say that I personally meet with all the student advocates once a month, and we collaborate. We collaborate on what's working at the sites and share ideas. So the incentives are a little different at every site. And then we also, when they have some challenges also, we share the challenges and brainstorm ideas to help overcome those barriers of getting students to school. So I think that's helpful too, having that monthly collaboration with just the advocates. Are there any other questions?
All right, I'm sorry. I just can't resist, everyone. My partner, Dr. Susan Levine, last year, she rubbed off on me. She always had questions at the end. And I just want to say, first of all, it's so remarkable that in 3 years, you reduce your disciplinary exclusion or suspension rates by about 60%.
Yeah.
That's about 20% a year. those are major strides. And
Huge.
now you're in, you know, the lower single digits, and I'm certain that that number will continue to contract. And could you tell us a little bit about how that came about? Because discipline, while maybe not the largest piece of the pie in any means, by any means, is an important part of chronic absenteeism. So how did you go about doing that?
We have the middle school and our largest elementary school adopted PBIS, which is positive intervention behavior supports, which I think was a huge factor in helping decrease our suspension rate. And that was something that Butte County Office of Education, it was a training that they offered. So we had teams attend PBIS. PBIS did help in bringing that those suspensions down, and where the advocates work came in encouraging. You know, oftentimes you see kids who are suspended is because they're frustrated because they are struggling with work. They're struggling academically, so they act out in class. So our advocates were also working as tutors and offering to help students, sit with them in the classroom if they needed, or sit with them during recess to help with them with work. It all started with, we have a chronically absent student. Advocate would get to know them, get to know some personal things about them, what they like, what they didn't like, foods, really get to know the student. And through those conversations, usually discover they're struggling academically. And so then offer, to help them. And I think that helped, that was one portion of helping with decreasing the suspensions, because for one thing, the kids were getting help at school, and they also had an adult friend other than their teacher at school that they could seek out if they were having problems socially, emotionally, or academically.
Almost sounds like a mentoring, a more informal mentoring relationship.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. Student mentors. Yeah.
Yeah, and when Lisa started looking at writing this grant, and we were trying to give her some support with that, and I directed her to the Check and Connect program, and then
Yes.
Yeah, she was like, this is exactly what we are trying to do. So it's really based on that Check and Connect mentoring model.
Yes, actually, the middle school has heavily adopted the check and connect, check in, check out with Check and Connect.
Could you tell us a touch about that, please? Just a little bit more.
Yes, it's basically checking in. You have a caseload of students, and you're checking in with them every morning, checking to see how they're doing socially, emotionally, and academically that day, and checking in with the students throughout the day. I know this is what the middle school does, and then checks out a high five at the end of the day. Sometimes it gets a little deeper into goal setting with the student also, but it's truly really getting to know these students on a personal level, so the students feel like people care about them at school and they want to come to school.
And I think the other success that really comes from that is these advocates are then really able to identify what is the true barrier that's preventing them from being at school every day, and the intervention to what the barrier is. Oftentimes, and Amir, you and I have talked about this, we sort of reach for that intervention that's, we're familiar with, and we know how to access it, and it's just kind of familiar, and it doesn't always match what's really happening for the family. So through these advocates, they really get to know the student and family and what's getting in the way, and can do such a fantastic job of making sure that that's what the support is being provided around. So I think that's been part of the success as well.
Yeah, and I should add, we adopted the MTSS model in Thermolito 3 or 4 years ago. And with that came the PBIS. And we also adopted and implementing UDL, Universal Design for Learning, which is all about student choice, teaching to the edges and not to the average, that not every brains are not average, teaching teachers how to give choice when they teach. And I think that also increases engagement. It lowers the suspension because kids don't get frustrated and blow up in class. Something else I should add, all of our school sites have come up with some form of a wellness center. So if a student is blowing up or having a hard time, they get to have a timeout in the wellness center where there's a counselor and a paraeducator there as well, which has really helped with our larger schools where they were having some major discipline issues. The wellness centers helped reduce that as well. Give them a safe place to have a timeout and to self-reflect and learn self-regulation tools like breathing, breathe in, all those wonderful things that help calm you, teaching those kids how to calm themselves.
Wow. So using pedagogy as a way to improve engagement, mindfulness, wellness centers, PBIS. I mean, y'all really have some good nutrition going over there. You know?
Yeah, it's taken a while to build all that, but we try really hard to connect everything so teachers aren't feeling like, oh, this is one more thing we have to do, and to show that everything we're doing is really for the kids. The focus is on students, and what we're doing is to improve student academics, social, emotional behavior, all of it. It all fits together, and when teachers see that it's working, they realize that it's all interconnected.
Thank you, Lisa. We do have one other question in the chat from Jen McCall. How many students does the advocate typically have on their caseload? And do you have a number that you would recommend, a maximum number?
So we really struggled with that in the beginning because the program that Sherry discussed, Check and Connect, is very, very heavily involved and is very, I don't want to say paperwork intensive, but it could be. So we tried to be careful and not giving the advocates a lot of paperwork. We just worked on having them track and get to know the students. So we struggled with this, and I can't say that we really came up with a number. And I really think that that's part of the reason why we came up with teams kind of organically occurred, because we realized, oh my gosh, we can't give advocates 20 to 30 students to track daily. We felt that they couldn't get enough of a personal connection with those kids because that's probably how many kids needed help. So the advocate teams help minimize the number of students for each adult. So the counselor would take a group, principal would be in charge of a small group, advocate would have some, secretary would even work with a group. So I'm sorry that I can't give you an actual number because it was so fluid that we couldn't come up with an actual number. And I'll be honest, when I was collaborating with the advocates, they were feeling overloaded. They were feeling like they had too many kids, like they couldn't make those good connections. So that's why we started really working with those advocate teams to where there was multiple adults helping with these helping with these students who had a lot of barriers to learning and were really struggling. But I cannot give you a number, and I can't even recommend a number because it's
a hard one.
It's a hard one, and our schools just made it work. When the numbers started getting too big, we started assigning a few kids to custodians. Hey, can you take this student under your wing, check in with them in the morning, give them a high five, give them a little job to do during lunch. We would start recruiting adults, and teachers were all, in the background of this as well, to help us with this caseload, because if it got really severe, the kids ended up going to a student study team or a student success team and go beyond. So I think we ended up recruiting more adults to help with a positive connection, so we could touch all those students. I'm sorry, I can't give you an actual number. We struggled with that so much in the beginning that we just said, forget it. We're just going to make it work.
That's a common approach to a lot of our work. Thank you so much, Lisa.
You're welcome.
If there's any other questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Lisa. We're happy to answer those for you. It's definitely been a journey, and I love seeing the results that they're getting. So thank you, Amir, for inviting Lisa today to talk about the program.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Lisa, for sharing your fantastic program. And thank you, Sherry, for introducing us and for your great work and guidance for all these years at the Butte County Office of Education. You know, team, one of the things that really caught my attention was the idea that when we think of student groups, we can classify them in a number of ways. They could be students who live in an apartment complex that are having a hard time getting to school. You know, it could be really that simple. And then we come up with a resource and a remedy. Sounds like the walking bus you created was a big hit. And, you know, one of the things that I'm seeing more and more as I try to learn more and more about this wonderful work is that finding those barriers for groups, even though they might not be in the typical categorizations we would like to put them in, is really vital. And you all have so many examples of that. And boy, what a well-balanced program you have. And it would sure be nice if you could come and check in or present with us in maybe in next year or whenever you like, just to keep us updated on the progress. And, you know, we're definitely going to continue to promote our Lunch and Learn. I think this is just such a difficult time and a difficult month, but we will be sending the invites out statewide. And thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, Cecilia and Wendy, for everything. And we look forward to seeing you next time, my friends. Hopefully one day we can actually have lunch together someplace and at least our Riverside County folks watch this.
Yeah, rumor is when that day comes, Amir is buying. So
Yeah.
I'm in.
If
Thank
that
you.
day comes, I'd be happy to buy lunch. Trust me.
Thank you, Amir, for providing this space for everyone.
Have a
Thank you.
blessed day, everyone. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care.